If we can see that innovation is a tool when used effectively to deliver better outcomes, to be excellent in how we serve the public, actually do what we say we're going to do in terms of the role that government plays in communities, it is a way to re-engender and build trust with our constituents. And I think that is something that leaders should not lose sight of, because the ability to build trust strengthens our democracy.
Innovation isn't just about new technology. It's about how leaders think. It's about how we solve problems and create opportunities for our communities. So, what does it take to build an innovation mindset in local government? And how can it help drive economic mobility and opportunity? I'm Angelica Waddell, and this is Innovate by ICMA. Today, I am joined by Leigh-Ann Buchanan, who is an author, a strategist, and president and CEO of the Miami-Dade Innovation Authority. Hi, Leigh-Ann. Welcome.
Hi, Angelica. I think the topic that you mentioned is just so apropos because everybody's talking about innovation. It's literally one of the most researched terms in the search engines online. And so oftentimes when we think about local government, that's kind of two things that don't go together. So I'm really excited for this conversation to dive in to really like demystifying the role that innovation can play in helping government serve constituents and residents better.
Absolutely, because right now most people don't really think about government and innovation together, but there are ways that we can change that. And I cannot wait to learn more from you, Leigh-Ann, about public sector innovation. I also want to let you all know that Leigh-Ann will be the keynote speaker for ICMA's upcoming conference, the National Economic Mobility and Opportunity Conference. It's this August 19 through 21 in Washington, D.C. Now, if you wouldn't mind, please tell us a little bit more about yourself.
So, this question about how do you introduce yourself, or really how do you want to present yourself to the world, is something I often struggle with because, like an innovator, I wear many hats. But I will tell you what I'm really passionate about is helping leaders understand how to unlock their latent potential as innovators. I'm really passionate about building things like MDIA or the Miami-Dade Innovation Authority, like some of the other organizations that I've been able to launch and lead. I'm really passionate about helping use technology, innovation, redesigning new models of social investment to really help unlock opportunities and transform communities. So, as you mentioned, I've written a book called Innovation Currency, which we'll probably reference here and at the conference. I have had podcasts, but really, I'm just fascinated about the future of leadership and the role that innovation plays.
And leadership and innovation really they fit perfectly well together. I want to start broad because innovation is can be considered a pie in the sky type of a thing. And like we said earlier, people don't always connect it with local government. So, what does innovation actually mean for local government leaders?
I think that the fact that you identified one of the big challenges with innovation is that it's so esoteric. Like, if we were to ask every single person that's tuned in, what is innovation? We would get a multitude of different definitions. So, just to start off, innovation is actually simply the process of creating something new. It is a process. There is a thinker who says creativity is thinking, but innovation is doing. So I really want to frame this conversation for people to understand that innovation is actually the action that you take. It is not the idea, but putting it into practice. And when we think about government, government is actually a publicly sanctioned monopoly. It's that one institution that we all have agreed can be the main steward of our shared resources, how we manage risk, how we make sure that as we live together collectively in society, we are taken care of. But the reality is that, like, somewhere along the way, government seems to have lost its focus. And just this North Star of serving the public good has not really translated in modern context. And so when I think about the role that innovation means for local government leaders, it is to reimagine what it looks like to deliver public excellence. So if you think about the moment that we're living in, right now we're seeing some of the most historic, historically low rates of trust in local government. Surveys show that like 20% of Americans actually trust the federal government, but then 70% still believe the government should be responsible for solving societal challenges. And at the local level, in most municipalities, less than 30% of services are fully digitized end to end. We're on LinkedIn Live. Why are local governments not doing LinkedIn Live to share information? So there's this disconnect between what we see in the private sector, how we experience technology, and then how we interact with local government. And that gap is where innovation can be the most effective tool for leaders. Because here, innovation is really about shifting the mindset beyond kind of accepting, like, that's how government works, that's how we always do things, to having leaders refuse to accept the status quo and start to think about what's not working. How can we deliver things better? What would it take to be honest about creating value for residents that improve the quality of life and really focus on why we're serving residents? I know a long winded way of saying, like, this is what we're going to talk about at the conference, which is changing the perspective of what it means to innovate in terms of delivering value to constituents.
One thing that really stood out to me just now is you're talking more about the processes of what local government does. You're talking more about the bureaucracy of what government does. You're talking more about the systems that we live within government. Because when we get stuck in those systems, that's what tends to lead to the, well, we've always done it this way, so we're going to continue to do it this way. But you're really talking about how can we step above and beyond that till we can match the expectations and the demands that our public has for us. Because, and then you talked about the why. Why are we innovating? It's not just to make a system better, but it's to deliver excellence. And I really love how you said that. So I think that also brings us to our next question, because I want to tie this into the economic mobility and opportunity topic, which is the topic of the conference that's coming up. So why is innovation essential to actually creating economic mobility and opportunity within our communities?
So I talk a little bit about this idea of the distinction between innovation as a process and the culture of innovation. Innovation is an identity neutral process. It's simply like doing something, creating something new. But what we often forget is that innovation exists in a cultural context, which adds all of these additional kind of encumbrances around how we think about innovation. And one of the most important distinctions when it comes to creating economic mobility, creating opportunities using innovative means, is to make sure you understand the distinction between inclusive and exclusive innovation. That is when innovation as a process is used to serve only a certain number of people, or only a certain number of people are at the table, versus broadening the horizons of how you can use innovation to serve more people. In my TEDx talk, I used a couple of examples of when innovation is inclusive, how people get left out. People don't get a chance to really enjoy the benefits or the fruits of what innovation can do. One example is everybody's on the internet. We're on the internet right now, but more than 98% of websites are not designed to meet the needs of people with varying degrees of disabilities, whether or not it's a visual impairment or an audio impairment. Like, not even using captions, for example, means that certain people don't get a chance to participate. And so when I think about your question, why is innovation essential to creating economic mobility and opportunity? I would reframe it and say, why is inclusive innovation essential to creating opportunity? Um, and one of the examples that I love to point to is a case study that I talk about in the book, which is something that I co-founded called Tech Equity Miami, now called Momentum Miami. And it was this crazy idea that could we redesign how philanthropic capital flowed in a certain community so that we could fund organizations that were creating tangible economic mobility and opportunities through tech career pathways, access to the internet, small business digital transformation. And our goal was, hey, what would it look like to deploy $100 million over 5 years? and really bring funders to fund initiatives together versus separately. That's an actual example of an innovative approach to deploying dollars to organizations that probably would never have gotten funded in a way that allowed them to do more with more. And ultimately, what happened is we launched that initiative with $55 million dollars in commitments. We're about to march into the fifth year or the time horizon for that project. And now there's been more than $75 million dollars deployed. And that's an example of how innovation can actually be used to create measurable outcomes in terms of economic mobility. It starts with understanding like what type of innovator you are. Like if you're a distributor type innovator, a person that's always reimagining how assets and resources and value flows, then your natural inclination is to use innovation to create opportunity.
I love that because you're not just talking about let's make a process better, let's innovate, let's bring in a new technology or whatever that action is going to be, but also bringing in that, I guess, research and that understanding of the community, having that baseline understanding of who's in your community, what are the needs in your community, well, who are the people that are typically unheard in your community, and then bringing that into that innovation process, because I think that's oftentimes what we're missing when we are innovating for our communities, is because we focus on, I have this issue, this could be improved, we're going to innovate, we're going to focus on that. But did we do that baseline part first? Did we really think about who are we missing here that we need to bring into that to make it inclusive, as you said?
At the EMO conference, like we're going to talk a little bit more about the different innovator styles. Like in my book, Innovation Currency, I wanted to reimagine who we call innovators because so much of the conversation around innovation is limited in our aperture of who gets to innovate, who qualifies as an innovator. It's often only the people that are building the tools, building the devices, or creating like a new software company in Silicon Valley. But the truth is that innovation is for everyone, and everyone is an innovator. The challenge is we just are missing the language to help people unlock this latent potential. What would it look like if you knew what your innovator style was and how you can uniquely apply it to the work that you're doing, whether it's local government, a partnership organization that works with local government? What would that look like to really redesign how things are being implemented so that we focus on actually like thinking about who's not there, making sure we get the maximized resources to people that need it, and bringing people into the process who are often left out.
You're right. A lot of us don't really think of ourselves as innovators, even if we actually are innovating already for our organizations in our roles, but we don't think about it that way. So this is going to help us become intentional. And I really can't wait for people to see your keynote session at the conference, because that's going to be so valuable to be able to dive into that. Now, speaking of that, we talked about one of these things. A lot of times people don't see themselves as innovators. But in your opinion, what is the biggest barrier to keeping organizations from innovating? Because if it was easy, everybody would be doing it.
I would say the biggest barrier that keeps organizations from innovating is this idea that you can relegate innovation to an office or a function. If you think about innovation, it is a process, it's a mindset, it's an identity. Therefore, it has to be this horizontal layer that is penetrating all aspects of the organization. It can't be that you say innovation is an output or a function of the Office of Innovation, and then you wonder why innovation doesn't happen. Innovation flows really well when it's embedded into the culture. And I know we're going to dive a little bit deeper into like the cultural aspect of local government and local government leaders. But for innovation to be effective, people have to see themselves as innovators so they can become innovation practitioners, so that they can understand how it can be uniquely applied to the work that they're doing. So often, these conversations and trainings around innovation is like, go read a book, now you're an innovator, go apply it. Innovation is actually a competency that leaders should have, but don't because they don't get a chance to practice it. So the more that you can think about innovation as like a function of your identity, and then something that is embedded into a lens through which you see the work and through which you execute the work, the more that from an organizational standpoint, in the aggregate, you'll be able to see innovation drive outputs. When you look at some of the data around the most successful companies in the world in the Fortune 100, Fortune 500 list, they over index on including innovation as part of their core values, as part of their mission statement. So it can't be something that is aspirational. It has to be operationalized and embedded into the organizational culture and also really like incentivized structurally. I just will say like I work a lot in my day job with local government and local government leaders, and so much of what you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation is that, like, there are these structural impediments, bureaucracy, incentives that actually disincentivize people from innovation because we don't accept taking risks. We don't accept redesign. We have so many processes that we can't say, is it working? We just kind of like march to the beat of whatever the SOP says. And those are actually the types of things that prevent innovation from being effective.
Right. So we put ourselves into this box and say, well, I can't veer outside of this box, so we're just going to go. And then you just don't even think about how can we improve this. And I have a comment here from Desmond. Thank you, Desmond. An administrative approach will be to encourage HR departments to recruit individuals with disabilities who can assist with user experience and revise other programs to ensure they are curtailed to as many individuals as possible, especially others with disabilities. That's a fantastic idea.
I think Desmond's comment like flags something that relates to the work that we do at MDIA. We partnered with Miami-Dade County to launch an airport passenger experience public innovation challenges. These are challenges where we kind of redefine what procurement looks like, put the problem out to the market, find the companies, and validate their technology as part of the program. And one of the things that we did, to Desmond's point, is we said, if we're thinking about the passenger experience, we need to expressly call out finding solutions that make it easier for passengers with different abilities to navigate the airport. And one of the companies that we actually was a challenge winner that we actually invested in is a company called Synapse. And what they do is they do real time um, ASL translation of announcements. If you're ever in an airport, you get these live announcements, but they don't often match what's on the screen. Like if there's a gate change, it'll be like it'll be 30 minutes before it matches the screen, and by then you've missed your gate. What would it look like to have screens with avatars that are doing the real time sign language translation of announcements so that passengers with hearing impairments can have the most up-to-date information to navigate how they can travel? And so that's an example in practice of what it looks like to think very inclusively about innovation, to make it a priority in how you're looking at kind of a project or an opportunity. And then that, one, it creates economic mobility for the startup company to be able to potentially compete for a contract, but it also makes the experience better of a constituent who's interacting with a core government service.
Being able to talk to those people about their experiences, that's going to help you get that insider look about what people actually need in order for this to be successful. I love that.
100%. Actually, Travis, who's the chief experience officer for that company, we recently partnered with them to do a behind the innovation tour of the airport, and they joined us. He's deaf, he's hearing impaired, and so having him share his travel war stories about how difficult travel can be really puts it in perspective. And one thing I want to emphasize, I think that Desmond's point is really important, is so much of innovation is often focused exclusively on the process, but there's opportunities for you to think about innovation as a tool of having more empathy. And leaders who are really great at what they do and are really effective in how they lead often have the quality of empathy, and innovation does allow for you to amplify that.
Well, I would say that empathy and culture can
Mhm.
lead into each other. So, our next question is, how can local government leaders build a culture of innovation, maybe a culture of empathy?
That's a great question. And I want to start off by saying that, like, government is a system, right? It is a mechanism through which we are delivering services, as I mentioned. But most people don't realize is culture is also a system. And it's this quiet system that like is almost embedded under government, under education, under finance, these larger like social systems that we navigate. And what is interesting about culture as a system is that oftentimes it overrides formal structures, policies, rules, and other behavioral kind of incentives. Culture is a system of norms and behaviors and beliefs and something that governs collective behavior. So, the key here for actually helping local government leaders build a culture of innovation is for them to work on changing how they think, what they prioritize, how they act. Because again, culture is a system of behaviors, beliefs, and how you operate. And so a culture of innovation actually starts with leaders. One, as I mentioned before, really seeing themselves as innovators so that they can give permission for their teams to also embody the identity as innovators. But it also starts with these mindset shifts. There's a couple that I think are really critical in the government context is to really focus on experience and execution. And so when it comes to thinking about the mindset shifts around a more innovative approach to how government delivers value to residents and delivers value internally is to think about experience. That's all things about, empathy for real lived realities. Thinking about who the user is, not the average user, but maybe those users that may be on the margins when you're designing services. It's also removing friction. So much of what we experience when we're interacting with government is friction. So, how do we use innovation to remove friction? It is also looking at how we measure success of our efforts by quality of life outcomes, not just by checking the box or service outcomes. So, like, did people actually have a better experience at the airport, or did we just serve X number of people at the airport? And then the second set of mindset shifts is around execution. How do we shift from certainty, requiring everything be 100% certain, 100% tied up, to understanding what's sufficient to make a decision? Because that over indexing for certainty is often what um, keeps things taking so long and then disappoints the end user. Treating speed and time to delivery as core measures of effectiveness. If you're using innovation, how do we do this faster? How do we be more efficient? How do we be more effective? And then finally, being able to be like adaptive. Innovation is this iterative process that as circumstances and factors change, it adjusts. And so removing the rigidity from how you think about your work is going to create the fertile environment to be more innovative. Changing how you think about experience, changing how you execute, that's going to create that fertile environment for innovation to thrive within local government.
I agree. And I would also add on to that, allowing your organization to be one that takes risk, to allow your employees to have the type of workplace environment that allows them to take a risk, because not everything when you innovate is going to be successful. Not everything is going to work out in the way that you may have envisioned it, but you need to be able to try those things and to be able to assess how you're doing iteratively as you're going along when you are making changes and you're taking actions. But if you can't take a new action in the first place because of risk aversion, then that's going to be really difficult for your organization to be innovative.
I think we have an opportunity to reframe what how we think about risk. So oftentimes doing the thing is considered risky. I encourage government leaders to think about risk as not doing it. What is the cost of doing nothing? That to me is a much bigger risk than trying. Because if you try, you learn, you get some context, you're going to be further along towards the goalpost. But then if you do nothing, that is very, very risky.
Well, that sounds surprising, but the way you say it, that's actually very true. It's very true because we can't afford to not innovate when we really come down to it if we're going to keep up with expectations and demands of our communities.
And I think this, like, kind of zooming out for a moment, a lot of times when we're thinking about innovation, it's in terms of like process or projects or outputs. But I also think that innovation and this idea of public excellence is really important important in terms of that stat that I told you earlier, where we're just at a historic low where the general public doesn't trust government. And at the
Yes.
end of the day, trust is the foundation of how democracy works.
Mm.
Democracy works well when we trust government. If we can see that innovation is a tool when used effectively to deliver better outcomes, to be excellent in how we serve the public, to actually do what we say we're going to do in terms of the role that government plays in communities, it is a way to re-engender and build trust with our constituents. And I think that is something that leaders should not lose sight of because the ability to build trust strengthens our democracy.
So you'll probably bring that up in your keynote. Now, let me tell people a little bit about the keynote, and then I've got one more question before we go away. It's the National Economic Mobility and Opportunity Conference, EMO. And Leigh-Ann will be delivering the welcoming keynote. It's called Discovering Your Inner Innovator in Pursuit of Public Excellence. And it's going to be August 19 through 21 in Washington, D.C. You will discover how innovative leadership can actually help local government leaders create greater opportunity and strengthen communities. All right, so when we come to this conference and we get to see this excellent keynote, if you could think about one thing that you hope people will take away after they listen to this, and maybe even after they listen to this interview right now, what is one thing that you want everyone to remember?
So I say this a lot, and I've already said it, but I will say it again. Innovation is for everyone, and everyone is an innovator. If you can take one thing away from that forthcoming conversation, this conversation, it is that because I want people to truly understand that they are innovators and they hold the power to use innovation as a tool of creating positive change.
I love that. Everyone remember this, okay? You are an innovator. It's not someone else in your department. Okay, it's not another team. It's you. You are an innovator, and you are going to be the person that can help make huge improvements to your organization and to your community if you just take that chance and be an innovator. I love it. More information on the keynote right here, www.emoconference.org. That's emoconference.org. That's where you can get more information on the conference, on the keynote session, and everything that you need to know about registering as well. Registration is open, and we do hope that you'll join ICMA and Leigh-Ann and the rest of us at that conference in Washington, D.C. Leigh-Ann, what any final words that you would like to leave us with?
If anything that we talked about today resonated, I'd love to see everybody there at the conference. And so you've got the information, and I look forward to meeting you in person.
Great. And how can people get a hold of you?
So you can always follow me on LinkedIn, but if you want to get a hold of me, leannbuchanan.com, or I always say I answer IG DMs faster than messages or emails. So follow me on Instagram at Leigh-Ann Buchanan.
I will definitely be following you.
Thank you.
Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Leigh-Ann, for being here and sharing your wisdom. That was fantastic. I loved this conversation.
This was so fun. Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.